Tuesday, June 16th here at Cape and Today, joined once again by Heather Atwood to tell you about all of today's stories. How are you, Heather?
I'm good, Corey. How are you?
I'm great. Leading off, we chatted with Taylor Bradford of the Gloucester Daily Times, as we do every week. She had a handful of stories for us today, including one about a rather disturbing arrest recently.
Yes, a woman who is well known on the streets of Gloucester, and she was acting in a disturbing way, and it's a disturbing story, but Taylor has a nice way of telling it.
She does. And then we also talked about some other big news happening around here, which is that the hotels reopened this week. We saw that all over the place. Castle Manor Inn, Cape Ann Motor Inn, Beauport Hotel. So there was some pretty exciting news there. The big news this week is City Council is facing a $117.9 million budget.
Right. And they will be discussing that, I believe, tonight and voting tomorrow, which is Wednesday.
And then on a lighter note, she talks about the upcoming drive-in graduation for Gloucester High School this Sunday, as if we haven't heard the seniors honk their horns enough. So Taylor, take it away.
Can you please introduce Hillary Rose and the problem there?
Yeah, so last time we spoke was on Thursday of last week, and it seems that news really hit the city the day following that. So there was an incident that happened in Gloucester where a woman by the name of Hillary Rose was arrested over at Friend Street for causing a disturbance. Now, the arrests happen, throughout the weeks in any city or town, but what makes this story a little bit different is that the news kind of blew up over social media over the weekend. A lot of people were reporting just her interactions with children and kind of approaching children and saying certain phrases and statements to them that was concerning to both the children and their parents who observed it. And so as of right now, she is arrested, and the full details can be found on our website in the log. But one of those things is people talking about where they've seen her before and kind of the discussion around what does it look like as people are approaching children and the safety measures. I know a lot of parents kind of raised the question of, is it safe for our children to be outside, and what does that look like? And so that story is still developing. We're seeing just how the community responds to not only the situations with a specific woman, but also just throughout of what does it look like for them to care for their children throughout the city. So that story is developing and will continue as things happen. But as of right now, that's where that is at.
When I read her article, it seemed pretty clear that she is there's something disturbed in her. There's something, she's has a mental illness. Has anyone sort of pointed that out?
So in the police log, they did note that they wanted to refer the situation to the mental health aide of the department to kind of talk about that and check and just kind of give them that follow-up so they can kind of send her to those people to continue the conversation as to give her help in that place. So there is definitely conversation. The police have made note that they're reaching out to those people to be able to assist them in that avenue.
Okay, because truthfully, the things that she was saying to the children, while it was very disturbing to have a stranger approach a child and say anything, but it was there were random statements, right? It wasn't anything that was, she was trying to provoke them directly. Am I right about that?
Right, correct. Yeah, it was, she, in the police log, it did mention that, she asked them to come here towards her, which as the parents kind of observed that they saw that and were concerned. But yeah, the statements that were said were a little, kind of unclear. And what does it look like? And if you look in the past logs, there's been other incidents where she has said other things like that. So definitely different and unsure of what those statements mean. And again, the police are continuing to kind of develop what might she have meant by that, as her actions didn't always demonstrate as the log stated what her statements were saying. So
okay, well, very scary for a parent for sure. So what else do you have this week?
So as we look at last week, phase 2 started to reopening the hotels. Very different subject than what we just talked about, but hotels opened up, and a lot of things have looked different for them, right? Beauport Hotel has, they're having over 200 wedding reservations from the beginning of this year and trying to navigate how do we welcome guests? How do we start talking about opening up weddings and what does that look like? But also, right, they have restaurants and bars, and how do you navigate not only providing spaces for guests to stay and sleep, but also for food? I asked the question of what about room service? what does room service look like for a hotel when you said that you can do outdoor seating? But we all know that people love to have food brought to their room. And so they actually said that they are doing room service, and it's contactless, where they'll order, the cart will be brought up. And what will happen is that they will have the guest come and take the food off the cart. And so that way they're not kind of having any cross-contamination. So really working on distancing. As you've seen in a lot of other stores, they have those spots for people to stand on. And that allows for people to kind of keep their distance, and when they're checking in, what that might look like. Again, they've talked about how they're doing a lot to kind of help with the training of their staff and making sure that they know what to do in different situations. And as I spoke to a variety of different people, as long with Mike Cronin, people talked about the key thing is that they want hospitality to remain. And while it might look different, they really want to emphasize that. So while people are being greeted and served with masks, that is something that is, changed, but the thing that they don't want to change is the hospitality aspect to their hotels. So we'll continue to see that develop, but definitely be different, especially as, right, weddings is such a big revenue for these places. And they've talked about how some people have canceled, some people have kind of postponed or rescheduled, but some people are just holding out and waiting and hoping that, they'll be able to host their wedding here over in Cape Ann.
How about the car valet services and the swimming pool? Did you hear anything about that?
No, I didn't. About the valet.
Yeah. Like, how would they manage that? Because that's a lot of contact.
Right. That's a good question, and something that I didn't check into, and I'll be very curious to know, actually, because of what that might look like. I know in other states, pools are open in different places. I know people all the way back in California, right, we see a spike in the pandemic over there, and been in contact with people over in California, and some of their pools are reopening with different guidelines of what that might look like. So what that looks like at Cape Ann, I'm not quite sure as of the time being. I know we have the perks of having the ocean so close to us, and so if people are willing to kind of brave a little bit colder temperatures, they definitely can if they wanted. But not sure, and definitely we'll look into that, as that's a really good point.
Because the hotel has that great swimming pool on the top there, which is a fabulous place to have a swimming pool, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And we know for folks traveling from out of state, there's still a suggested 14-day self-quarantine when they're coming here too. So again, just suggested though, and not, I don't know how that gets policed or becomes mandatory. But anyway, Taylor, you also wanted to touch base on the big budgetary meeting this week.
Yes. So before we get to the big budgetary meeting, right, we all know for different reasons, a big part of the budget that will be presented later this week is Jim Destino. Jim Destino has retired from his position as Chief Administrative Officer here in the city of Gloucester, and he was a big proponent of helping put together that budget and kind of helping the city through the pandemic, but also navigating what does it look like for the next year. So just a quick hit that, Destino has retired, and he has talked about wanting to spend more time with his family and also being able to kind of hand off the baton of the restaurant to his other family members. So a really exciting aspect for Destino. I know he had been looking to retire in April, and that kind of changed. But so to answer your question, Corey, is so the City Council will be having a public hearing tomorrow at 6 p.m. over Zoom to discuss or hear community members' kind of thoughts and concerns and suggestions about the proposed FY21 budget. That can be found on the city's website, and will be found also a link to that on our website when we publish an advance later today. But something key proponents of it is kind of looking at the school. What does it look like? Also looking at waterways. There's a list of just different things that the city is looking to put money into this year, and there's a couple different things, but the big thing is to know is that there's going to be it was estimated to cost about $117.9 million to run the city this year, and all those details of what that looks like, both with the Gloucester Public Schools, the Water Enterprise Fund, Sewer Enterprise Fund, Talbot Rink Enterprise Fund, the Waterways Community Preservation Fund. Those things are big ticket items that are on that list, and kind of the details, again, are on that website, and kind of give a little bit of insight on kind of what does it look like for the city to run also during a time of a pandemic. So that public hearing, again, is 6 p.m. tomorrow. And then the following day is that they're going to look to vote on the proposed budget. So we kind of have a big week of numbers and kind of looking forward into the future of Gloucester.
And lastly, you wanted to talk about Gloucester High School's graduation coming this summer.
Yeah, so it's super exciting. I know there's probably been a lot of chatter, and as students are closing their books finally and turning their Zoom classes off for the summer, is the Gloucester High School senior drive-in is going to be happening at on Sunday, and it's really exciting. It's very different. It's been a lot in the works. People have been talking about it. I know I've heard it from Gloucester school committee members, from students, from parents. They're all just very excited to kind of continue those celebrations that these students have lost in different ways. And so this is one of them. So students will be coming to O'Malley and to the parking lot and being able to see a huge video of kind of celebrating their time at Gloucester High and what does it mean for them. And again, they're going to be having hopefully an in-person graduation later this year, with all things considered with COVID. But this is kind of the second. We had the first one was the drive throughout the city. This is kind of the second celebration that they'll have this year. So looking forward to going to that and reporting on that as it happens on Sunday night.
So as we keep saying, no one is going to forget the graduations in 2020, right? And Gloucester High School will have its first drive-in theater graduation. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but the seniors and their families will be parking their cars at O'Malley Middle School, and there will be some kind of screen, and 1623 Studios has actually participated in helping create some kind of production that everyone will be watching. So I still think it's exciting, although it's also kind of a letdown for these poor seniors.
Well, either way, a tip of the cap and I guess a flick of the gown to all the seniors graduating this weekend. Yeah, congrats to all of you. We had a rather solemn chat with Hannah Kimberley. She's the president of the Cape Ann League of Women Voters about some very important legislation that Mass legislators are dealing with this very moment.
Yes, exactly. And we actually spoke to Senator Bruce Tarr last Friday about this voting bill. It is the bill that will ensure safe and participatory 2020 state elections in response to COVID-19. So this is a bill that will allow basically everyone to vote by mail. And Hannah describes the details. She goes into what it's all about.
So this bill is sort of an emergency bill that's come about. It's called an Act Relative to Voting Options in Response to COVID-19. And what it does is it's already passed in the House, which is great, and it's now in the Senate. So I think I talked with Bruce Tarr's office today, and they're not sure how he's going to vote on it, but it does look promising, I think. And so they're back in session on Tuesday. So it's been a quick sort of moving bill. But the bill that was passed by the House, what it will do is allow for mail applications for vote by mail ballots to send those to every registered voter before September 1st, the primary.
So they get an application for a vote by mail ballot.
Right.
They don't get the ballot itself. It's an application.
Right. And then, and also before the November 3rd general election as well. So, and they're going to create an online portal for voters to request a ballot by mail, and expand in-person early voting in both elections as well.
So the primary and the general election.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the primary is what date?
September 1 is the primary. Yeah. And it's also going to, what else is it going to do? It's going to give us prepaid postage to return both applications and ballots, which is great, and allow the election officials to process the mailed ballots before the election day. So what used to happen when we started early voting, which was just a few years ago, right? So you could go to City Hall and vote early, and they would take those ballots and put them in a secured box. And that box would stay there until election day. And then all those ballots would go on election day.
Which election day. Yeah.
Right. But now you have, because of coronavirus, people are probably going to vote, more people will vote by mail. So if you can imagine, if that increases our mail voting by, 50% or 70%, that's going to take a long time to go through and feed all those, like through on election day, through the scanners. So the results won't be tabulated or reported until the polls close on election day, but they will be able to process those ballots beforehand.
As they come in.
Right.
Great.
Yeah. And it's also going to allow voter registration up to 10 days before each election. And before this, it was 20 days. So it's going to, there's so much in this bill. It's really great. So
Can I just ask about voter registration? Because a lot of the means of voter registration right now are not available, like the Registry of Motor Vehicles. So
right. So it takes, you can just go to Francis Gavin's website. You can register. Yep. It takes like 3 minutes, if that. You need your driver's license number, or I think maybe your social security number, one or the other.
So online register to vote with the Secretary of State's website.
Yep.
And
And it's easy.
Right.
Yeah.
Primary. Okay.
Yeah, I do it with my students all the time. So,
Good.
What else? So it passed through the House, and again, then is kicked to the Senate, and is right now in the Senate Committee of Ways and Means. And I hope that it will pass. The sooner it's signed into law, the sooner our officials can sort of take the steps that are needed to really assure that our fall elections are safe, right?
Right, exactly.
Of course, you can still vote in person if you want, but the idea is to limit the people going to vote.
Right. So could you just, is it possible for you to run, compare and contrast? Okay, so right now, if we were to vote tomorrow or next week, vote early. But we couldn't do mail-in voting. And so I'm just getting weedy here. Could you possibly just run through 1, 2, 3, the assets to this bill one more time? We'll cut that, Corey.
Really?
Okay, just to summarize, Hannah, one more time, do you want to run through the virtues of this bill?
Sure. So before, you would have to have an excuse to vote by mail, to absentee vote, where Massachusetts is 1 out of 17 states that still requires that. Then there's other states who do not require an excuse. So the argument is fear of coronavirus an excuse, right? Because you're not really ill. We do think it's an excuse. And I like the idea of not having to have an excuse to vote absentee.
Therefore, everyone in this state could possibly be compromised by the coronavirus. So we should all be allowed to vote by mail. But
exactly.
In the past, you needed a legitimate reason to vote by mail, whether you were sick or out of the country or something like that. Great.
Exactly. And there's 5 states already that conduct all their elections using a vote by mail system.
Right.
So it works.
So, and the early voting has been expanded for both the primary and the general.
Right.
People can vote how many days before the election?
10, I don't know exactly how many days that it's across the board. Well, it must be across the board. I don't know that they've decided those dates yet.
Okay, because the bill isn't passed the Senate. Okay, and the last piece is that the votes that are coming in early and by mail can be tabulated or processed before election day.
Exactly.
It makes it easier for the poll keepers to manage that.
The volunteers, right, who stay up well past bedtime counting all those ballots, right?
And the last is that the application is the postage is paid on the application, right? And the ballot.
Yeah, so that gives greater access, right? So in my dream world, it would cause more people to vote.
Right.
I don't know that will happen, but in my dream world, it would. So.
Well, and Hannah, are we learning any lessons from like the recent election in Georgia and how mail-in ballots are working there or not working, or what can you comment on that?
Right. Well, I mean, in different states already, you're having people have to stand in line in close proximity to vote, and it's dangerous, right? So I would love for this to set a precedent and we could just have vote by mail permanently in Massachusetts. But I sort of want to be like, Colorado and all those other states who are already doing it.
I know Iowa had a very successful election recently, and there were a lot of, they voted by mail, right?
Yeah. So I think it's Colorado, Oregon, Utah, Hawaii, and Washington who are all doing all of their elections using vote by mail.
So do we see any arguments against vote by mail?
You do. You would think that it was sort of, I think sometimes when I see things in the news, it looks like it's a partisan line, right? Republicans don't want vote by mail, Democrats do. But actually, that's not necessarily true. There was a study put out by Stanford that found no sort of partisan effect of implementing universal mail voting. So I think it's about really education. You can also see there's high percentages of people who think it's okay where they already have it, right? Because they know what it is and how it works. There's I think also the argument of fraud, but there's been election fraud studies done on vote by mail. And one was out of MIT, their election data and science lab. And so I think they found something like it was like 0.00000 or 0.00006% of a fraud rate. So I think it's safe. And I think that most people are for it because it just makes it easier.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Hannah, for elaborating on this bill for us. And as you said, it's in the Senate now and they vote on Tuesday. Is that right?
They're in session on Tuesday. I'm not sure when they're going to go through, but it should not be too long because it's an emergency bill. It would be moot if it dragged on and on. I called Senator Tarr and said, we really support this. The League of Women Voters supports this. So anybody else who wants to support it, just give him a call.
Well, it just so happens, Hannah, that right after this, we'll be talking to Senator Tarr, and we'll follow up.
Good. You'll have to ask him.
So again, this bill is really important. It allows for people in the state of Massachusetts to vote safely from home, and for the town clerks and the people working at the polls to be relatively safe because they won't be having all these numbers show up. I do want to say that Hannah left out a couple of details that may or may not be in this bill. It was in the bill that the House passed and it is going to the Senate now. But one of which is there will be voting on Saturdays and Sundays in both the primary and the general election. They will choose a Saturday and Sunday before the election in which people can vote in person, vote early. And just a reminder that the postage is paid on both the application for your ballot and the ballot itself. So those are just a couple of things that are kind of important that people should know about.
Yeah, and we'll be following up with you on that story for sure. We want to thank our guest today and, of course, our partnership with the Gloucester Daily Times and our sponsors at Say Hello Home Watch. Tomorrow, we have Ward 4 Councilor Val Gilman and Reverends Janet Parsons and Susan Moran. Heather, what are they talking about quickly?
Yes, the Reverends will be talking about a website that documents the existence of slavery on Cape Ann and the abolitionist movement on Cape Ann.
Very cool. So we have a great Tuesday night. We will see you on Cape Ann Today tomorrow.